Hi Tim, good to meet you. Welcome to Metal Exposure. It's a pleasure to actually have you in a meeting with us here today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. And you sound great. I probably should have hooked up a microphone now that I think about
I
it.
had the pleasure of listening to the new album through Storms Ahead earlier, and it's for me it felt very much a sort of return to your roots, but also a natural progression of the sound. So balancing those two things was very impressive. Did you intentionally go about doing that, or is that just something that I've picked up?
No, I appreciate that you picked that up because it's a little bit of this push and pull within the band in a good way. That's sometimes
Mm,
I think creative tension is important. Um, Phil as a guitar player is you know, very much interested in you know, different ways to advance and to expand as a guitar player. Um, but then I'm always there to sort of remind like, hey, guitar is so important. It's the primary way that we write songs. Phil and I both play guitar, but we have to see the big picture, and the big picture a lot of
yeah,
times down to sometimes simplicity and these older styles of melodies that you could like sing in your head because they're not so intricate. And finding that balance and making the both of us happy, and I think in trying to find a compromise, we've presented the record as you've described.
excellent, excellent. I mean, you've been as a band, you've been around for what since the early 2000s, if I remember correctly, so about 20 odd years, and you know over that time, a lot of the metalcore scene has developed and changed, but you've managed to maintain very much that sort of core sound, and it doesn't matter which track you listen to, you still get the impression that this is something different, but it's you know who it is, you know it's As I Lay Dying. Do you think that being able to maintain your sound and not necessarily get drawn into too many of the fads and the different directions that have come have actually made you more sustainable with your fans and actually made you get bigger rather than just following the trends and getting short-term wins?
Yeah, it's you know it's interesting because I enjoy like a lot of these newer movements, like what the deathcore genre is doing.
Yeah,
Um, you know, and I've grown up like listening to thrash metal and everything, but sometimes with certain subgenres, um, there's like a lack of melody to where it's hard to know which band you're listening to, right?
mm,
And so with As I Dying, it's like, well, there's got to be something within. I love like pushing the heavier boundary. We have a song like We Are the Dead that
yeah,
pushes the fear side, but I want it to be like, well, it's still memorable in the sense that it's that it's an As I Dying song, right? And then when we get to the
correct.
melodic side, um, I really pushed Ryan and wanted him to sing more on this record because I think as an additional vocalist and him having his debut, so to speak, uh, he did such an incredible job. I just really wanted just was really proud of his addition to the band. And so even when we'd have a very, very melodically driven song, we'd still find that way to insert just enough heaviness that it felt like
Mm.
us as well. It's like finding that balance, like you're saying. Um it's making it identifiable that if you're hearing a playlist of 20 bands and an As a Dying song comes on, it still feels like us. And occasionally with other genres, like now you always use deathcore as the example. If you put on a playlist of 10 deathcore bands, I might not know when it switched from one band to the next.
Yeah, completely that. I mean, you mentioned We Are the Dead there. That was a collaboration, Alex Turble and Tom Barber, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, so I mean, speaking of Ryan's addition as a vocalist, I got really addicted to this idea that um, you know, I can write a song foundationally with my verses and lyrics the way that I want, and there's going to be a natural amount of diversity because Ryan's going to come in at some point, and the weight doesn't all fall on my shoulders, right? And then I
Mm.
wrote the demo for We Are the Dead, and I, as a guitar player, I play guitar behind the scenes, and occasionally I'll bring in a song, and of course Phil will refine it and make it even better. But the idea there was like, hey, you know what? I want a song that's just relentless, start to finish, no traditional chorus, right?
Mm.
But then when I was done with it, I was like, well, I'm kind of sick of hearing my own voice for 3 minutes straight. You know, and so then I started bouncing around some ideas, and actually, the first two that I brought up were Alex and Tom, and so fortunately, we have enough history and friendship there that those both worked out. And so the song got to come to life exactly as I envisioned it, which is always really cool from a songwriter standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And the finished result is really impressive, just exactly as you described. So it's very nice when you have something in your head and you have like a vision of how it should be, and then you're actually able to create it, then that must be very rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that one of the creative tensions that are good is like I view something a certain way, and then Phil might view it a different way, and then now we have these other guys, and they're coming in and they're bringing in a perspective we might not have thought of. And so sometimes a song like We're the Dead, it was able to get brought to life very similar to how I wrote. Actually, the demo and the final product are extremely similar, but in other songs it's the opposite. It's like, well, it's being pulled away from the original vision by the other guys that makes the song exciting. And Burden is probably a perfect example of that song got pulled actually in a totally different direction than it was based on some idea that Phil had written, but I had sort of like repackaged it into a new song and then brought that to our producer, and then it got repackaged a third time into what it is now. And so sometimes going away from the original vision is part of the excitement as well.
Yeah, no, that's it's very rewarding. I mean, whatever you end up doing, it's so long as you're happy with the finished product, that's the key, isn't it? That you are confident with it and that you're happy and you're telling your story in your way. And it's good to have a good producer and a good team around you to help to bring that to life, but it's still got to be your vision.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the album as a whole, it's a very introspective album, right? I mean, what were the things that kind of influenced your decision to go down this path with this particular album?
Well, if you look at Azolang lyrics as a whole, most of them are very introspective because I typically will write like in a journal, not even writing lyrics for a song, just
Okay.
in a journal, like, you know what, I'm just gonna process some of the things I've been through lately, just kind of get them out, not even trying to be poetic or anything like that. And then later I'll come back to some of the, like, I remember that I remember that feeling, and I'm listening to this demo, and these feelings like match up to me. And then from there, I'll go into like a little bit more of a metaphorical approach where it's like, well, I don't want to say it exactly how I said it in my journal. And there's some great lines in my journal
Mm.
that are like, oh, like, and you haven't read your own, like you come back like, oh wow, I like that's cool. That's cool. I didn't realize, like, that I had written something that way. And that actually feels a little bit poetic, even if I wasn't thinking that way at the time. So I'm able to pull out like the best parts and then reshape the rest of it to fit the songs. And that's why it ends up being very introspective. And in the process of trying to help myself through whatever it was I was working on at the time, I'm
Mm.
always thankful if somebody else comes to me and says, hey, that song really helped me as well. And it's like, okay, that's awesome. And I think one of the reasons lyrics are so relatable is that um it's not exactly spelled out like what I mean exactly as it relates to my life. You can tell it's personal, but you can also
Mm.
a person can also apply it and interpret it in their own way.
Yeah. I mean, was that part of that goal of being a bit more, I suppose, poetic with the album? Did that influence the sound and the introduction of I suppose there's more of a heavier use of synths in the album.
Yeah, the I think the additional synth layering comes from a couple things. Phil and I both have been writing songs for so long. We're looking for elements that are exciting for us to expand a little bit. And so him and I both have gotten a little bit more familiar with that during our demo process. But then also our producer Hiram, he's way far beyond us in terms of his involvement with synths and that layer, those layers of production. So it's like, Phil and I bringing even just a little bit of that in a demo,
Mm.
he was able to expand and bring a lot more, and then it would actually get to the level where we'd have to cut back. Okay, now we've added too many layers and it's gotten too far away from the original demo. Let's like clean it up a little bit. But it's always good it's easy to hit mute on a few channels, so in the
Yeah,
final.
yeah. No, I mean, Phil was quite active though as a producer on this album. Is that right?
Yeah, it's the best way I could describe it is like we hired Hiram to produce the record, but because Phil
Oh,
and I have done so many records together, we're sort
oh
of like
okay. Mm.
hard-headed and opinionated enough that like you can't really take the self-produced mindset out of us, right? So it's like in the end, and I mean this like just matter of factly, not necessarily like in a disrespectful way, but it's almost like a self-proclaimed co-producer in the sense that like we we weren't necessarily starting the record with that like, hey,
Mm.
we're hiring Phil and Hiram. We hired Hiram, but we Phil wouldn't let go of the reins enough to like
Yeah.
fully Hiram solely produce it. And that's not because we don't trust Hiram. Hiram's an incredible producer. It's more just that familiarity of doing something for 20 years, and so it just sort of ended up that way.
Yeah, no, but that makes sense, and it allows you to really get your vision across rather than it being someone else's vision, and you're constantly trying to, tweak it and adjust it all the way through, and not really ending up with something you're happy with. Now you feel that, yeah, we're really proud of this because it's something that we wanted it that way, and we know that it is telling our story the way we want to tell it. So that's
Absolutely.
fantastic.
And I'll say that for the demos that I brought to the table, I was very much on the side of like, hey, Hiram, you're so talented. Let me assist you. Like, why don't you be the producer and do what you do best? And then for the demos that Phil brought to the table, he was like, you know what? Like I just I have this very clear vision. This is what I want to do. And so it
Mm.
almost like ended up being somewhat split to some degree of like um the songs Phil wrote were mostly produced or at least more largely produced by him, and then the songs that I brought to the table were uh, entirely produced by Hiram because like that's like why hire
Hmm.
somebody so talented and not let them do their job, right? So
Yeah.
that's where I think where the combination comes in.
That's very good. In the introduction of Ryan's vocals, I think was it Burden in particular, it really stands out, and it's a big element for him. Was that something that you had planned from the very beginning, or was it something that you just sort of evolved as you were developing the album?
Uh, well, we always knew Ryan had incredible potential from hearing his long history with Miss May I,
Hmm.
uh, but that's his voice as a younger person growing up because I mean they were like teenagers when
Hmm.
he first recorded them, and so part of it is like we knew he was developing just in just having more experience, but then the other part is like, well, once he gets in there with Phil and I and Hiram, like when we have the ability to produce him, it's we really felt like it's going to present the best version of Ryan because of all the personal growth he had, plus our ability to work with
Hmm.
him from the production side and Hiram being a great producer. So we were just excited to like sort of show off that best version of him. And when I was exchanging ideas with him, I would take each part of a song and say, well, let's find the vocal that best fits this part of the song rather than it doesn't have to be me, it doesn't have to be you. Like let's just
Hmm.
find what's best for the song. And that's where we ended up.
Oh, that's a really great approach. And so, do you see that the introduction of the more atmospheric areas that we talked about, and then the more clean vocals is a direction that you'll go in future albums as well?
I still think that approach of like let's find the vocal that's best for that song or that part of the song. So like to come back to We Are the Dead as an example, like
Mhm.
um, you know, if there's a song like that, I always intentionally write one song that's at least one song, usually more like two, but a couple songs that are very much on like the heavier end of the spectrum
Mm.
of our album. And generally speaking, those probably won't include Ryan or much of him in the future. And then other songs, we had a song, "The Cave We Fear to Enter," which was
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it a ballad, but in the world of As I Lay Dying being generally a heavier band, that's like as closer to a ballad for us, relative to our sound, right? It's the most melodic song, and with songs like that, I don't mind almost like taking a I wouldn't say I took a back seat per se, but like being
Mm.
like an equal singer with Ryan. There's really no ego involved in it, so it's just on a
No.
song by song basis.
No, that's it. I think you're well established enough to be comfortable in who you are now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really just want the best songs. I love
Exactly. Yeah.
writing songs. I originally didn't even want to be a vocalist. I wanted to be either a guitar or bass player slash songwriter behind the scenes. And in the early days of As I Dying, that was the mindset that I had and the role that I had.
Mm.
And we just never really found the right frontman besides myself. Uh, and that eventually after doing it long enough, it's like, well, now we can't change frontman at this point because it'd be weird, right? It's like,
Mm.
you can't be on the rise and developing people identifying with your sound and
Yeah.
then change gears. But for the first two recordings of As I Die, I was actively looking for somebody else to potentially
Okay.
sing so that I could play guitar.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. You mentioned actually the cave we fear to enter. Now, that was kind of about confronting past demons and things like that. Do you have any advice for the fans who are going to be watching this, who may struggle with a similar sort of thing? You know, how they could approach it, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, the what I like about that title and just the concept of that is it's really simple. It's like there's this famous quote, and I'm gonna maybe slightly butcher, but the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek, and that's really what inspired that concept. And it's a lot of times in life the thing that we're putting off, we know we should face it. Um, and most people, if they write a list of like, if you actually put it, at the top of the paper, you write like things I know I should do, but I keep putting them off, right? That's a really important list, and like
Yeah.
everybody has that. And if they take time to actually stop pushing it out of their brain and write it on paper, they realize, okay, if I were to do these 5 things or whatever it is, I would be a better person. My life would be better. It's just going to be difficult. But as soon as I tackled whatever that list is, it's going to, the rewards, not necessarily financial, but the rewards will
Mm.
start bringing into my life. And that's really the concept of what that song is about.
Yeah, that's superb, and it's a great philosophy. Absolutely, it's a really good approach, and
Easier
it's
said than
nice when
done,
you can
though.
start giving back as well, though.
Yeah, easier said than done. I
Oh,
can't
absolutely, yeah.
come from a standpoint of saying this. I wrote that song because I mastered this. It's
No,
that song because that's how I want to live my life, and that's how I'm
yeah, yeah.
struggling and striving to live my life. So I, always want to make that clear.
Yeah, but that's a good thing. Now you've put some art out there that is going to inspire others as well. So you can lead by example. And
Right.
so your live performances are very intense and yeah, powerful, and you're quite known for that. How do you plan to bring some of these emotionally charged elements onto the stage when you're performing now?
I think that's where like the subconscious has to take over, because I think that if you've as a musician, if you've rehearsed and it's muscle memory, then you just sort of enjoy yourself and be in the moment. Metal's not exactly the kind of like genre of music where you're choreographed. Maybe we have a guitar solo and you're supposed to step into the spotlight, right, or something. It's about as far as choreography goes in our genre. So I just really want to you know connect with the crowd, see where the energy is there, and um just let my subconscious sort of take over.
Are there any songs that you're particularly excited or nervous about performing live?
uh the combination of nervousness and excitement is exactly how most bands feel, at least for me, about playing new songs, because it's exciting and fresh and new, but then the audience doesn't quite know it the way they know the other songs. So there's not like, no matter how good the song is. I mean, for instance, our highest stream song I think to date now is "My Own Grave," but the
Mm,
whole first like 6 months we played that song on tour, the crowd would sit there like, oh, you could tell they were like kind of enjoying the song, but they weren't really interacting, right? Because it was like new. I think
mm,
part of it too
mm.
is if you tell the audience it's a new song, they like almost like will stop moving and just like observe, so it's
Yeah.
like, you know so whatever that is, and then it just takes a certain amount of time. So it's that nervousness and excitement all at the same time. And so I have a love-hate relationship with playing new songs.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you think the album's going to go down with the fans as you start to take this on tour now?
I think so I mean, so far, we've released 4 songs, which is
Mm,
new era, by the way. Like, back in the day you would never release more than 2 singles, because people were going out and buying a physical CD or vinyl, and people still buy vinyl, of course, which is really cool from
mm,
a collector standpoint. But now we're in this age where like some bands don't even do albums; they just do a bunch of singles, and so
yeah,
we're trying to like hybridize that to some degree, where we have this concept of singles to get people engaged in like the streaming platforms, but we don't want to give away the whole album, because we want the the vinyl and all of that stuff to still have an exciting release.
exactly. Yeah, of course.
So it's something I'm really proud of the new record, and I really think that
Yes.
our fan base so far for the four singles that we have has seen a little bit of the diversity, and that's
Mm,
important to us too, because when a band only releases 1 or 2 singles, I think one of the things is the criticism of like, well, this single's cool, but it doesn't have this element. It's like, well, of course, there's 10 songs on the album. We can't put all elements
yeah.
in all songs. Yeah.
That's very good. And we've got, yeah, just a minute left. So 25 years now, I believe it is, and the metalcore scene has evolved significantly. How do you see As I Lay Dying contributing to the evolution of the genre as we move forward?
Um, well, I don't, claim by any means to be an inventor of metalcore, and I know there's there's funny uh comments from other bands that have said something like that and then get criticized for claiming to invent the genre. We're far from being one of the first, but we are definitely in that wave of bands
Mhm.
that really developed the genre into what it is today. If you were to almost stereotypically think of what is metalcore, especially the classic, quote unquote classic metalcore sound, right? People are most likely going to think of, As Lay Dying and Killswitch Engage and
Correct. Yeah.
I don't know, I'm not actually really sure beyond that. I mean, like those are sort of like the two.
Yeah.
Um, they're always, the top five class. And they may we may not be their favorite band, but they'll recognize us as sort of like, an example of the classic metalcore sound. And I think that's something that's really cool for me to be able to say after all these years is that um, we didn't invent something, but we sure helped develop it.
You
And
certainly helped
a
perfect
lot of
it.
these younger bands have said like, hey, it's really cool to like that you came out to our show because you influenced, why we got started. And
Yeah.
that's like something that really just makes me feel really, really good because I look back on thrash bands that I grew and I say the same thing to them. When I go hang out with Gary Holt and Exodus, right? I'm like, Gary, it's just so cool that we're friends now because
Yeah.
I literally wouldn't have, picked up a guitar and played, half the songs that I've written in my career if it wasn't for your band,
Mhm.
and it's cool to be able to like return that favor, so to speak, to
Yeah,
this next
completely.
generation. Yeah.
Superb. Well, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to talk to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thanks for making time to do this.
Thanks very much. It's been a pleasure, and best of luck with everything.
All right.